Hey there, welcome back to Diesel Creek. My name is Matt. If you didn't already know that, you might not appreciate this video, but then again you might. Either way, I'd like you to stick around and enjoy what has become a year-end tradition here at Diesel Creek, which is going over the vast expanses of my ever-increasing horde of machines and projects and things that I'm working on. I started this last year. I just did a video walking around and checking out every single piece of machinery that we had here on the property, and we're going to do the same thing this year. You might be thinking, oh, well, I'm going to see the same stuff over again. I wouldn't jump to any conclusions because you might be surprised as to what is not here anymore and what still is and what new stuff is here that you haven't seen yet. There's definitely some things sitting around here that I know you guys have not gotten to see, at least not the primary focus of any videos. You may have seen something in the background and said, what is that over there? But I didn't tell you. This video is what I'm going to tell you. It would appear I've picked a great time to start this video because it is raining outside at the moment. Bringing that into consideration, we will start in here in the shop under the roof where things are high and dry. Before we get too far into things, during the course of this video, there's probably going to be some pieces of equipment or projects or whatever that I come up on and I say, kind of losing interest on this, probably would sell this. If you're actually interested, and please, I don't mean this to be rude, but I get so many questions and just bombarded with emails that I can't feasibly get back to all of you. I really wish I could, but the numbers, if you haven't seen, we're closing in on like 830,000 subscribers last I checked. There's just too many. I'm one guy, I can't keep up with it. So if you're actually interested in purchasing something, you can drop me an email at dieselcreek@gmail.com. But if you're just a tire kicker, please spare me the time. I'm not trying to get rich off of this stuff. I usually just want out of it what I have into it, and I would like to see it go into greener pastures. That is part of what I do here in saving a lot of this old stuff. It's not that I want to hang on to it forever. It's just that I save stuff from bad situations where it was going to wind up in the scrapyard. Also, as we go around, we're going to be answering some of you guys' burning questions. I've been getting one in particular over and over and over in every single video. And I've addressed some of you directly in the comments, but we're going to tackle hopefully all of your most burning desired questions here in this video as well. I guess we'll go ahead and kick things off with the Genie here. As you can see, that's a Genie GTH 1056 model. This is what you would call a telehandler, or some people call it a lull. A lull is actually a brand name, but it's kind of like a Kleenex tissue thing. People use the term interchangeably. I picked this thing up at the auction a while back with the intent of flipping it and trying to make a few bucks because I was able to get it for what I consider a pretty good deal. I think I paid $22,000 or $23,000 for this machine, but the trick was it was inoperable. As you can see, it's in the shop. I'm still working on it. Not that I've spent a ton of time and haven't been able to get it going. The time that I've spent has been productive. Unfortunately, my attention span is that of a gnat, and it's sat here all year with me barely touching it. I do have it licked, I think. I have some parts sent off to Area Diesel Service to be worked on, and then I have a few other things I think it needs. And hopefully once I get that stuff back, we'll be able to reassemble, and it is going to be for sale. I'm going to go ahead and put my foot back in my mouth now, and I know I just told you I'm not trying to make a bunch of money off this stuff, but something I bought like this with the intent of flipping for profit, I do need to make a good chunk of change off that because it's kind of the whole point. If I can find a set of forks for this unit, I'm going to ask $40,000. If not, we're going to look at a little bit less, but all in all, it's a great machine. It does have a few hours on it. It's got, I think, around 10,000 hours on it, but overall in very good condition. Everything works, four-wheel drive works. The tires are foam filled, so you don't have to worry about flats. That's very expensive. I actually just looked at pricing that on my other telehandler and was shocked at what they wanted. I think it was like $2,500 per tire to get them foam filled. So we're just going to keep plugging it. Doesn't seem to be any hydraulic leaks. It looks like a nice tight system. It carries 10,000 pounds and reaches out 56 feet. And this is an outrigger machine with a closed cab. So fairly desirable still, even though I think it's a 2010 or 12 model, something like that. Not a whole lot here to write home about. But it's what's in the shop right now and is something that you're going to be seeing in a video here, hopefully sooner than later. Next up on the list here is, of course, the 1980 Auto Car Constructor we've been redoing for this past year. Well, it's kind of fell on the back burner here, getting close to the holidays and the busy season. The body guy has the hood and a few other pieces for it at his shop he's working on. I still need to put the engine back together and slap the transmission in it. We are at a point where it's ready to start reassembling, which is cool, but that detail work, finishing out like the interior, the cab and stuff, that all takes time, and it's just not been my focus lately, but we're getting there. It is my hope, and of course don't hold me to this, my hope to have this truck back together and at the spring steam show up at Brownsville. That's May, so we got a lot of work to do between here and May. This big rusty behemoth here sitting in the way is an Ingersoll Rand 750 CFM Detroit diesel powered compressor. I actually just put a video out on this thing, I think yesterday as I'm recording this, or maybe it's 2 days ago now. Runs okay, still troubleshooting the actual compressor side of things because it makes air, but not enough, not near enough. So we're still working on that. I don't think it's gonna be a huge major fix. I think it's gonna be something fairly simple. I just haven't got to really dive into it yet. What with the holidays and everything going on, kind of takes my focus away from here in the shop and back at home, which is good from time to time. This guy here is the 71 F250 service truck that I got, a little over a year ago now. I just put out a video on this thing, I think 2 weeks ago, so you guys should have this pretty fresh in your minds. Doesn't need a whole lot. We're close to putting the bed back on. I got to do a little bit to the bed and figure out something on the exhaust there. I just need a elbow basically on the exhaust, and then we're ready to put the bed back on, and so a few other modifications I'd like to do once the bed's on, and then this thing is going to be ready to load up and hit the street. I'm really looking forward to doing some revivals with this beauty over the course of next summer. That should be a lot of fun. Rolling up to fix old junk with old junk. I like it. Last thing in the shop here is my Clark CMP15 forklift I picked up a couple months ago. You guys just saw it briefly at the end of the last forklift video I did. This theoretically should be my ideal or dream forklift, whatever you want to say. It kind of fits the bill of all the criteria that I'm looking for in a forklift. It has tires that make it able to go outside and run around a little bit without burying itself instantly. It has a triple stage mast, which reaches up about 18 feet, I want to say. It's just shy of touching the rafters, which is pretty convenient. Runs and functions okay. Needs a little bit of TLC. I need to go through and do a good general service on it. I think it drips some coolant and has a little bit of moisture in the oil, but propane forklifts tend to do that anyways, just because they don't really burn hot enough to get the moisture out of the propane, so it ends up in your oil. So hopefully I don't have a head gasket out, but it is a little milky. I need to get a service done on this thing sooner than later so we can check all that. Outside of the service, I think it's got a little hydraulic leak up there on the valve bank, nothing serious. It's been like a revolving door here in the shop for forklifts over the past year, but I don't think this one's gonna go anywhere. I think this one's actually gonna stick around. I like this little guy. The only thing I will complain about, if any of the engineers from Clark happen to be listening, there is no foot room on this thing. I understand it's a little forklift, but like my feet literally don't fit between the pedals and the seat base there. Toyota, they got their stuff together when it comes to leg room. Well, it is once again that time of day. It is lunchtime. I work up quite an appetite out here, but there's one thing I hate. Well, multiple things I hate. Cooking, dishes, standing in grocery stores, and meal prepping. I don't like any of it. And if that sounds like you as well, you need to try Factor Meals. Factor delivers fresh, never frozen, chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals straight to your door every week. Just pop them in the microwave, heat them for 2 minutes, and they're ready to eat. And not only are they easy and convenient to cook, but they are delicious, and there's no cleanup. With over 35 meals to choose from each week, they have a little bit of something for everybody. They've got keto, protein plus, vegan, vegetarian, all of it. And the best part, they're all delicious.
It's my first time having the Baja shrimp, and you wouldn't think that shrimp that have been in the microwave could be that good, but they are.
You won't believe it until you've tried it for yourself. Personally, Factor has saved me a ton of time and money here at the shop because I used to go run out for lunch every day, and that wastes a lot of time driving around, waiting on food, and these are actually cheaper than something that I'm going to get from a drive-thru and way more tasty. These are not those frozen TV dinners that you remember as a kid. These are honestly delicious, and I promise you, you won't regret it, and you won't believe me until you try them for yourself. Now is the time. Head on over to factor75.com or use the link down in the description there and use my code 50 CREEK to get 50% off of your first box plus free shipping. That's code 50CREEK for 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Anyways, lunch is over. Let's get back to work. Well, I think the rain has slowed down so we can move this production outside. We're gonna step out under the lean-to here and have a gander at what's under here first, and then we're gonna start branching out from there. First thing out the door, little Yamaha 4 Moto. I did a video on this thing a little while back. I haven't done much with this unit since the video on it, but it's still running and working just fine. No complaints. Sitting next to the little four-wheeler is this Schmidt blasting pot that Buddy Sam hooked me up with. This is the one that I mentioned in the first video on that big Ingersoll compressor. We're gonna have to figure out all the hoses and whatnot that I need to attach to this thing to make it a functional blasting pot. But it looks to be in good shape. Other than that, I don't know much about it. Between this thing and the big compressor in the shop, it should make blasting big equipment go by pretty quick. Behind the blast pot, we got my Bobcat S185. You guys have seen this thing in videos for years. It's not going anywhere. It's a nice little handy yard machine to have around here, although it doesn't see a whole lot of use anymore. It could use a couple of the cylinders repacked, and the headliner is falling down, but other than that, she's fine. Hard to get you guys in to see the next two things in line here, but the first thing you have is the 1998 Humvee. This is not a Hummer, it's an actual Humvee, the military variety. I need to probably pull it out, dust it off, and slap a for sale sign on this guy because I have not touched it all year. Just too many other things demanding my attention. It's a fun little around town cruiser, that's for sure. It turns a lot of heads, but ultimately I've just kind of lost interest in it. All it really needs is some air in the tire and it's good to go. Behind the Humvee is my old International 4900 10-ton dump truck. This is one of the first projects that ever hit the channel. I took that truck and put the dump bed on it and made it what it is today. We've used it in plenty of videos. It's a good old workhorse around the farm here. Hasn't seen a whole lot of use this year either, but it works really good as a scrap hopper. So at the very least, once in a while it gets run down the road and run to the scrap yard and dump stuff off and parked back here under the lean-to. I finally picked up a clapped out Bridgeport mill the other day. Me and Sam went up to HGR, which is like an industrial reseller. Got a decent deal on this old Bridgeport. I believe it's a Series 1. It's a J Series head, I know that much. I really don't know much about Bridgeports other than they're handy to have around. I do have a little bit of machining background, not a ton. I know enough to be dangerous, and one of these things can make a fella dangerous. Haven't even plugged it in to try it out yet, but it's here. I know somebody's gonna ask, this is not my unit, this is my buddy Adam, the electrician's unit. I have it on loan. I need to use it under the lean-to here to run a water line back to the back of the shop. Finishing out the equipment under the lean-to here, first thing is the Honda Pioneer. This thing has been super handy. It's really nice to be able to just pile stuff in the bed, run it around. Not to mention it's a blast to drive. You guys saw the video on this thing, hopefully. Picked it up at Ritchie Brothers a couple years ago. Took me a couple years to get it fixed, but I've been having a good time with it here for the last half of the summer. Nothing really good, bad, or indifferent to report on it, other than I think I can smell a little bit of coolant when I'm running it, although it doesn't appear to be leaking anywhere or burning it. So I'm not sure what to say about that. Outside of that, it's been working good. No complaints there. Next to the Pioneer, of course, is the mighty Ventrac. You guys see this thing in videos all the time. This thing is an absolute beast. I love this thing. Pretty much in tip-top shape, ready to roll. Currently have the turbine blower mounted on it, and man, this thing is so nice around here for keeping the leaves in check in the fall. I have an absolute blast on this thing, cleaning up the leaves, and spend probably way too much time on it. As soon as the leaves start changing, I get excited to mount this thing up and spend some hours just blowing leaves around. Next to the Ventrac is old Johnny Graydoll. You guys have seen this thing in plenty of videos now too. I picked it up back in the springtime, I believe it was. And man, this thing has been an absolute game changer around the yard here. Being able to pick stuff up and raise it way up or boom it way out or whatever. This thing has done everything from me, from loading trucks to screeding concrete. And I don't know how I lived without one of these things before. It's got a little 4BT Cummins in it. It runs great. Transmission seems strong. For as much as I use this thing and have become reliant on it, I do need to pull it into the shop and just do a good going over on it because it's got quite a number of leaks. There's a bunch of hoses that look like they're seconds away from exploding. This tire over here likes to go flat all the time. So it could use a good spa day, if you will, in the shop. But I have really grown to like this thing a lot. So coming off the end of the building here at the lean-to, I guess we're gonna go down this way, go all the way down the driveway, hit up Purgatory down at the end of the driveway, do a tour through there, and then come back, and then we'll come in back this way and loop around. So there's a lot to see. Let's keep on moving. You guys have seen the little air compressor over there. We use that for sandblasting and whatever else we might need a large volume of air for. I picked that up last year at Ritchie Brothers and have used it a fair bit. Other than needing a service, it's pretty much ready to rock. The old trusty TL240 here. This is my primary skid steer, and it has treated me well. No real issues there. It's just a good solid unit. Could use a bath, but outside of that, she's cherry. Behind the 240 is the Bomag BW213 PD. I bought this machine back when we were putting in the fill for underneath of my building. If you haven't seen those videos, those are some really good videos. Some of my finest work, if I do say so myself. I had a lot of cameras going, and it took a long time to edit those videos, but I think they turned out really good. This is probably one of the few purchases that I actually regret. I paid a lot of money for this machine. I think it was like $21,000, and I used it maybe 10 hours, and it crapped the bed on me. I never did a follow-up video to the first video on this machine, but I kind of posed it like I got burned on it because I kind of feel like I did. When I originally posted that video, I was intending on doing a follow-up video very soon after, but life got busy and we've never gotten around to fixing this old girl. But basically what happened to it is the drive coupling here from the drum drive. This is actually like a final drive that propels this whole drum. The coupler that attaches it to the drum broke right off there. So there's nothing holding this drum in the frame on this side. At the end of the video on this machine, you can see I have the Kobelco, and I'm actually dragging this thing over here. I parked it here, and it's been here ever since. I need to get on this thing, or somebody needs to buy it off me as is. Obviously I know I'm not going to get out of it what I got into it, but it is a good running machine. I mean, it packed dirt very well, and it operated just fine until that happened. Here's another unit that's on the chopping block, I'd say. This is an International 270 Series A pay-hoe. Good to run an old backhoe. It's not much to look at. And I guess the biggest downfall of this unit is that it needs every single hydraulic hose replaced. They're all terrible looking. I've never got to use the back end much. I know that on these particular units, the swing, the drive motor that does the swinging for the actual backhoe part, is typically a weak point. This one seems to be a nice tight unit and functions very well. The tires are all good on it. I've never put air in the tires since I've owned it. And I think the engine is a low hour reman. So some hydraulic hoses and it would be ready to go. It's actually parked right here because over the summer I was using it to bucket some gravel around, and I actually blew one of the lines that runs for the transmission. So I just hurried up and parked it, and here it sits. It's not really very high on the priority list to fix this thing. I would fix it to load it on somebody's trailer if somebody wanted to buy it. But yeah, it's just not a great machine for me because I have so many other machines that could fill its role. So it'd be great for somebody that just needed one machine. I'm not going to go rooting through every single shipping container here, but in this shipping container is the Jeep CJ5, the blue one that we've done a bunch of videos on. I have it stored in that container so that it's out of the weather for the winter. I'll crack open this shipping container for you. In here, we have primarily engine storage. There's a pile of Detroits back there, an 855 Cummins. Up here we have the 13-speed that I want to put into the auto car whenever we get around to that. Other than that, we have that cool old antique concrete buggy I did a video on a while back, as well as the old Frankenstein trench compactor and my plate tamper. Not much else going on in here. Over here is our little Letourneau D4 airborne scraper. I'm ashamed that this thing is even sitting outside. It was kind of one of those things where it got pushed out of the shop just for temporarily sake, you know, over the summer when the weather was nice, and unfortunately never got put back in. I do want to get it into the shop very quickly though. In fact, it is one of the next two things to go into the shop. It doesn't need a whole lot. If you guys saw the first video on this thing, the engine runs. I could not get it steering and driving very well though, So that's why it needs to go back into the shop. There's a bunch of hydraulic master cylinders that all need rebuilt so that we can get this thing back in the dirt. Over here is my Genie Z-Boom. I think it's a 2545 model, something like that. I actually picked this thing up last year, I think it was, for $1,000, and it works. It's a 4-wheel drive, gas powered. When I bought it, it was pretty much in working condition. It needed a little bit of TLC, but I mean, you could use it, and I wasn't afraid to use it. It doesn't look nearly as terrible as the other one that I had was. That one's long gone, and I kept this one because it was the better of the two. Over the summer, I was using it, and the cylinder that controls the tilt of the basket blew out. If you try to run this machine now, the basket immediately just starts trying to fall whichever way it can, whichever way gravity wants to take it. So I have a ratchet strap holding it up for right now. This thing wouldn't take a whole lot to throw in the shop and repack that cylinder and do a few other little odds and ends on it, and it would be back to good operating condition, which I do need to do sooner than later because I kind of rely on it for cleaning out all my gutters. I have gutter guards, but it's definitely still a lot nicer to get up there and keep them clean. We're gonna go ahead and jump on the old junkyard golf cart here to complete our tour. That Honda Pioneer is nice and all, but this golf cart still has its place around here. It's a lot nicer for just jumping on and taking off. If you guys have never seen this golf cart before, it's actually one of the first units to hit the channel as well. I picked this thing up literally sitting in a junkyard. It was in the scrap pile, and I think I paid $100 for it, brought it home, put maybe another $100 into it, and I've been running it around here for years. It's been a very handy unit to have. I did put some new tires on it over the summer, I think, and man, this thing is a Cadillac now. Could use a paint job, but outside of that, she's cherry. Over here is a Takeuchi TL12 I picked up at the auction over a couple months ago now. This thing is already for sale. I've been using it a little bit. It runs great, works great. It's a beast. Unfortunately, I just don't have a need to have 2 skid steers sitting around here as much as I would love to keep it. It makes a lot more sense for me to flip this thing, try to get a couple bucks out of it. This is for sale. It's got somewhere around 4,000 hours, I think, and it's a pretty tight machine for the age. Pre-emissions. Right next to the Talk, we have the Case CX80. I bought this machine, I think this was a little over a year ago now too. I think I got this at the end of last summer. You guys saw me put that awesome Work Brow progressive link thumb on there. That thing has been awesome for clearing. I purchased this machine from Clint over at CNC Equipment a little over a year ago now, I think. And it's been great. No real complaints there at all. We've been using it a ton this year on the house project and other things I've been doing around the farm here. And it's just a really nice machine. You may see as we're covering some ground here, there's light plants kind of scattered out everywhere. And none of those are for sale yet, but here after the house project is done, we probably have 2 or 3 of those come up for sale. Let's move on down the driveway here. Next stop, Caterpillar Land with a D4. This fine little gem here is a Caterpillar D47U. This poor little thing has been sitting out here now for, I think, 3 years. It is a shame. This thing was here before my shop was built, and I hate that I had so much passion for this thing when I brought it home, and somewhere along the line, it all quit. I do still really like this. I do really like these old D4s. These things are just, I don't know, they're fun tractors to play with. They're not really a great tractor to take out on a job and actually try to do dirt work with, but it's a very cool piece to me, and this is actually what's going into the shop next. This and the little D4 Laterno that I just talked about are both bound for the shop here very, very soon. I've kind of pushed myself to that decision, not only because it's been sitting here for too long without being touched, but because I am cleaning up the driveway here. Since we built the house, of course, me nor my wife want to look at all my junk scattered out along the driveway here. So I'm in the process of consolidating and cleaning out the sides of the driveway. By the end of next summer, I'm hoping there isn't anything along my driveway. Moving on down the line, we have this old tire truck sitting here. This is a Ford F550 with a 6-liter Power Stroke in it. I lied, it's a 6.4, not a 6.0. Again, does run, does function, bad head gasket. You guys actually saw me use this truck a long time ago when we put the new pony engine on my first D8. I actually used this little knuckle boom crane here to install it. This thing was very handy for that. but ultimately not really what I'm looking for in a service truck. So this truck is for sale. I've been meaning to list this thing for forever now. It does have a really good tire body on the back here. As you can see, it belonged to the tire shop that I use. Has a good working lift gate on it, nice aluminum body, working knuckle boom crane. It's a good unit. I just don't have a use for it. As you might be able to see, in the back of the truck is my outdoor wood boiler that I've been threatening to put in for a year now, and we're really close. I actually have the boiler lines run from the shop and from the house over to where we're going to put the boiler, so we're getting there. Things are moving. They're just moving at a snail's pace due to weather and holidays at this point. Sitting next to the Ford, we have an International 3850 loader. I picked this thing up from Upper Michigan, if you might recall. We had to get the injection pump rebuilt. I got it running. I've used it a little bit around here. Ultimately, haven't touched it really hardly at all this year. In fact, I'm not sure that it's run at all this year. So this one could probably be on the chopping block too. It's a cool old loader. It's got good tires. I mean, it's just a neat little piece. Unfortunately, I just don't have a whole lot of use for it. Next to that is the JCB 718 haul truck. This thing has been great. I actually bought 2 of these back in the springtime at Ritchie Brothers, if you might recall. And we used these things a bunch this year between clearing and digging for the house and everything else that I do around the property. This thing has come in clutch. As I mentioned, had 2 of them, and I sold one for a pretty good profit and kept this one for my own use. It doesn't need a whole lot. It could probably use some new brake shoes and a few little TLC items, but not much of nothing. It's pretty much a turnkey workhorse. I'm not on this side of this tree very often, and I just noticed that it's pretty hollow and got a pretty nice split going about 12 feet up. You might not be long for the world, little guy. Well, we've made it up here to the overhead crane. I have gotten more questions and more demands for content over this crane than I think any other project I've ever done. You may recall a number of years ago at this point, I picked up this crane for $1,000, and this is a 48-foot, I believe, span bridge crane. Now it's rated at 7.5 tons, and I don't believe that rating is because of the structure. I think that rating is only because of the hoist. The hoist is rated at 7.5 tons. I'm no engineer, but I'm fairly certain this double beam bridge would hold quite a bit more than 7.5 tons. In the video where I bought this unit, a lot of you correctly said that, Matt, that unit is way too large for your shop. You're 100% right, and I never bought this to actually put it up in my shop. I bought this basically for the beams. You couldn't buy one 48-foot long, 2-foot tall beam for $1,000, let alone 2 of them, let alone all the other stuff that's welded onto it over here on the side, let alone all the gear train and the motors, and let alone the hoist and all the runway trucks at the ends. You couldn't get any of that for $1,000. So what I was doing when I bought this thing was buying a large pile of parts for $1,000. I had zero intentions of actually putting this unit up in the shop as it sets. So back to the larger project at hand, what is putting up the bridge crane in my shop? We're not forgetting about that project. It's just one of those projects that would be exponentially more expensive to just bite the bullet and do it all at once versus taking my time and piecemealing it together, buying stuff like this, buying vertical columns, buying the runway beams. We're getting to the point where I have most of the pieces to that puzzle, and hopefully we'll be thinking about actually putting it up here sooner than later. It was my original intention to do it over the winter here. Maybe that's not feasible. I would like to get it done before too long. I actually just purchased, I have yet to pick up, another hoist similar to this. It's the same capacity, 7.5 tons, but the main difference is this one is meant to ride on top of a bridge like this, and the one I bought is an underslung unit that's meant to go up and around the sides of the beam, basically giving you the maximum amount of clearance with the bridge, which is what I need in my shop because I don't want to be limited on height or lifting height. I had acquired last year a 5-ton unit that was an underslung mount, but it didn't go up and around the sides of the beam like I was after to keep that high head clearance underneath the bridge. So in addition to this bridge and all the parts within, I have now the runway track that the bridge is supposed to ride on to go back and forth across the shop. I also have beams over there that are going to be the supporting vertical columns to hold up said runway. The only pieces I'm really missing to this puzzle at this point are two 40-foot beams that I'm going to use to go across both ends of the runway. I need some sort of small, maybe an 8-inch by 40-foot long beam just to link the ends of the runways together. That way they stay nice and stiff. As you may be aware, the price of steel has actually gone down right now, and I'm getting really close to just biting the bullet and buying those two beams because I don't seem to be having any luck coming across them organically. So I might just purchase them at this point to get that project rolling, because it would be super handy to have my crane in the shop. So over here's something I've never showed you guys before. This is a 53-foot van trailer, and currently it is hooked up to the Deuce and a Half tractor. It's not a real military tractor. It's a Deuce and a Half that somebody converted and put a fifth wheel on. I've been using this basically as a yard dog, just shuttling trailers around. It is proving to be fairly handy for that. It would be a little more handy if it had brakes, but ultimately it does the job. But the 53-foot van trailer, you'll never believe this, I bought for $50. Of course, some of you may say, yeah, well, it looks like a pile of crap. I'd give you $50 too. Well, it's worth considerably more than that in scrap alone. The only thing about it that really bothers me is the landing gear. The jacks are in pretty poor shape. I'm not sure that they would actually support this unit, especially if you had much weight in it. Where I got it from, that was actually sitting up on some concrete blocks. It's got some bullet holes in the side of it, but ultimately it doesn't have any major holes in the roof, which is a bonus. And what I'm using it for right now is not a whole lot actually, but I need to load this thing up with Cub Cadet tractors is my plan. See, it's nice and dry in there. There's a few little odds and ends that are laying around inside of here. And there's 2 drums of 90 weight up in the nose there actually that were in here. Full, brand new sealed drums of 90 weight oil inside the trailer that I paid $50 for. So that was worth it right there, not to mention some of the other odds and ends. There's a big cable sling up there and some other stuff that's very usable for my cause. But I've got some wood from the sawmill in here drying out slowly. It would be preferable if we had some air movement on here, so I might put some whirlybirds on this thing and actually use it for drying lumber. But ultimately, I'd like to put my horde of Cub Cadet tractors in here, keep them out of the elements. Well, we're now down here at the end of the road, and I mean that both literally and metaphorically. We're at the end of my driveway in the area that Sam has dubbed Purgatory. And before you say anything, Purgatory definitely could use a cleanup and a reorganization right about now. We kind of brought some stuff in hastily over the last couple months and haven't had a real chance to move things around and organize them. Some of these things are hardly worth mentioning, but we're going to move quick from left to right. Not everything down here is junk or even questionable. Some of it's good stuff. It's just parked down here out of the way. I have a tow-behind vibratory smooth drum compactor there with a Kubota V1505 on it. That was one of the first projects on the channel as well. I think that was literally the first video I posted as Diesel Creek was that roller repowering it. Next to that, we have a High Ranger bucket truck. The neighbor actually just dropped this thing off one day. I did not go out looking for a High Ranger bucket truck. This thing had just shown up before I did this video last year, and somebody was interested in it, and they weren't interested because I said it didn't have the title. I found out afterwards it did have the title, but I lost your contact information. So if somebody's interested in this thing, it does run and drive, and the bucket does work. I know the ground controls work. I think the bucket controls do not. I have never even looked at that truck. He just said, hey, you want this thing? I'm going to scrap it. And I said, sure. And here it sits. Tucked back in the trees there, we got a Doosan light plant. It runs, but doesn't make power. Got to investigate that. In front of it, that yellow guy right there, that's an Ingersoll Rand SpiroFlow. I believe it's a 150 CFM air compressor. It's got a gas, either a Continental or an International engine in it. I don't recall. I know it cranks over. I've never done anything with it. I'm sure it would run and make air. So if I ever get to it, great. If not, I don't really need it. I could probably be talked out of that if somebody's looking for a nice little compressor. It's pretty tidy for the year. I'd probably say it's late 60s, early 70s, but it looks pretty nice. It's got all the badging and everything still on it. The tin's not all rotted out real bad. Down here, we've got some old farm implements getting grown up in the weeds once again. I did a video a couple years ago cleaning up this area of the property and reorganizing, and I issued the call then. If anybody would want these things for yard art or like something to put in your flower bed, I know people do that kind of thing. I would probably make you a good deal on these things. I could scrap them myself. I'm not looking to give them to somebody that wants to scrap them. I think they're neat. These are pretty early. These two corn planters here, they're double row corn planters. Those are designed to go on like F12 Farmalls, something like that era. There's an old 2-bottom International plow behind it. There's also a number 4 self-propelled John Deere sickle bar mower. Next to all that goodness, we've got an HD6G loader. This is an Allis Chalmers. We did a video pulling this thing out of the woods back, I think it was last summer at this point. Brought it home, determined the engine was locked up, which, go figure. I think we figured out that it had been sitting in that spot for 40 years. So it wasn't a big shock that it was locked up. But the ultimate question is it salvageable? Could you get it running again? Because the undercarriage on this machine is like brand new. I don't know why they parked it, but it's got basically a brand new bottom on it. It's just sat for so long that it's kind of all frozen and stiff. But if you could get the engine running and just work it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, you might be able to get it freed up and usable. Even if you do all that, it's still a really old track loader that doesn't have a whole lot of productivity left in it. A skid steer would work circles around something like this, but if you're not in a hurry, this is a great old machine that will do a heck of a lot of work. You just got to have the time to let it do it. Some of you might question why, but this is actually on the shorter list of projects that I would like to at least see if I can save. I'm getting to a point where, of course, I know I'm never going to get to all these projects and complete them. I have zero ambition of restoring this thing. I just want to see if I can get it to run. I really like getting stuff like this running. When somebody tells you, oh, it's locked up solid, it'll never run again. No, I don't like that. That's not a good answer for me. If I could at least get this thing to a point where it would fire up and drive itself onto a trailer and somebody could take it and do the rest, I would be more than happy to send it down the road with somebody that could give it the love that it requires. Because ultimately, as rusty as it is, it's a very straight tractor. The only real bad spot I've seen is this battery box is pretty rotted out, but that's straight sheet metal. You can replace that very easily. The fuel tank is immaculate, does not have one ding in it. And I challenge you to go find another HD6 that doesn't have one ding in the fuel tank. Back here behind all these dozers is a 22-foot aluminum dump trailer that I picked up from the same place the HD6 came from, the same place the service truck came from, the same place Sam's first 46A D8 came from. That property has been an absolute treasure trove, and we got a ton of stuff out of that place that was going to be scrapped. So this thing is actually in really good shape. It's been sitting for a long time, and I think it's like a 1959 or a 62 model, something like that. It's pretty old, but as you can see, these aluminum panels don't have a single ding in them. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find one of these trailers that's only a couple years old that doesn't have any dings in it, let alone one that's been used and abused for how long and is still in this good a shape. I mean, it's not perfect. You can see there's a tooth hole down there. Somebody pushed on it with something, put a little ding in it, but ultimately is a very straight trailer. I think with a little bit of work, this thing could be back on the road. I do have the title for it. If I threw a set of tires at it and brakes, slack adjusters, this thing could be 100% going back down the road without a whole lot of effort. I think this would be a great trailer to be hooking up to the auto car and taking it up to the quarry and getting some rock here and there for projects. Moving on though, not too long ago we did a video on bringing home this guy and that guy. This is what I figured out is a 1964 Caterpillar D8H 46A, which just means that it's a power shift D8H. I have not touched it since we brought it home, but I have all intentions of hopefully reviving this thing. It doesn't need a whole lot, I'm hoping. I really don't know the whole story on it. I know they told me they parked it because the turbo went out on it, but that was many moons ago. I have the exhaust manifold for it, but I do not have the turbo. This engine has been sitting like this, open to the elements for quite a number of years, but was kind of parked in such a way that hopefully it didn't get full of water. I don't know if the engine is free yet or not. And even if it is stuck, there's a chance you could get it unstuck. Even if all that goes well though, we determined that there's some parts missing off the transmission. Don't know why they did that, but this tractor is especially straight and clean. Look at this battery box. Those don't exist like that. If you find one of those in that good a condition, I'd say 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a reproduction or whatever. Somebody patched it together with some Bondo. This thing, all solid, real steel. That lid, perfect. You can even see on the control center here, when these cats get a lot of age on them and a lot of wear and a lot of hours, you can always see it in this control center here because people wear into this. A lot of times that whole F, the letter F, will be worn completely away, and this one is in pretty good shape. You can still see most of that letter F, barely touching the O, and into the R, you're not even touching it. This HD11 came from the same place as the 46A behind me, and we were able to get these at such a price that it didn't really matter if they're salvageable or not. I have no idea the condition of this one at all. The transmission controls seem like they're fairly frozen. Undercarriage is a little meh, and it does need an idler on the other side, but they believe that's why it was originally parked, was the idler had gone bad on it. I didn't notice until after we had it loaded up and on the trailer, that muffler has quite a split in it. Could have been letting water down into the engine. I haven't touched this thing at all yet, so I don't know if that's the case or not. When I released the video of getting these two tractors home here, a lot of people were demanding that I work on the D8 first, but I don't know, something about the Allis-Chalmers is kind of tickling my fancy. Sitting over here between these two machines is an Allis-Chalmers HD5. Now, I've done at least one video on this thing in the past, getting it running and then loading it up on my trailer. It runs really good and it drives back and forth just fine. The hydraulics all work as well. The problem is it doesn't steer. Both of the steering clutches are frozen up good and tight, and I cannot get this thing to break loose for the life of me. What we're going to end up having to do is take it into the shop, pop the transmission top off of it, and manually get in there and whack those steering clutches and hopefully pop them loose. After that, this thing should be a fairly good running little HD5 track loader. I don't know that I'm going to hang on to it or not. It is neat that it came from Highway Equipment, because if you haven't heard, the Highway Equipment Company of Pittsburgh, PA, is no longer in business. They went out of business 2-3 months ago now. Just up and shut their doors out of nowhere, which is a real shame. They've been around our area for a long, long time. In front of the D8 in the Dozer Chaos up here is a Caterpillar D4D model. Now, it might look pretty rough to you, and that's because it is. I paid, again, scrap value for this thing, maybe a little less even. And the reason I was inclined to do so is because this particular D4D model, even though it's in rough shape, has a power shift transmission, which if you've never run a dozer, is a lot nicer to run a power shift than a manual transmission machine, in my opinion anyway. I have another D4D that we're going to get to later, and it's a good working machine, but it has a manual transmission. So it was my brainiac idea that, of course, I needed more projects, and I could swap this transmission into the other D4 that we're going to see later. I actually just brought this thing home, 2 days ago now? That's why the lowboy is still parked over here. I am certain that the engine is locked up, because if you saw where this thing was sitting, it had been there for a long, long time, and the muffler was laying on the ground next to it for a long, long time as well. That leaves that exhaust pipe pointing skyward, unprotected from the elements, and I'm just certain that that engine is locked up tight. Back to my earlier point, though, of I just like making things run that people think don't have a prayer of running. We're going to give it a go. There's a chance that it will be free, I guess. There's a chance that it's not locked up. There's a chance that even if it is, I can make it not locked up. The guy I bought it from told me they had parked it to start restoration on it nearly 20 years ago or so. They just never got to it. They did one of the other machines that they were starting around the same time. They finished that one out, but this one they just never got to. The keeper of the dozer madness up here is the old Kobelco SK250. Ugh, I'm just starting to notice she is going to need another bath here soon. The algae is getting on her again. It's a shame about that yellow. It seems to really attract algae. Not much to say about this machine. It's a good old workhorse. One of these days I'd like to get around to changing the pins and bushings in the stick. I do have those. I've had them since I bought the machine and just never took the time to do them. They're not so bad that you feel like you're destroying something to run it. They're just a little sloppy. It would make the machine that much tighter and nicer if I did that. It also needs a muffler. That's why in the last couple of videos you guys have seen this machine, it sounds like it's missing. It's actually just the muffler is blown out of it. I started pricing them out, and I think the only one I could find was like $900, and I felt like I was getting hosed for that, but I might just end up having to bite the bullet because I've never found a cheaper one. I traded my buddy Sam for this nice little service bed here. Ultimately, I have a truck that we're going to see in a couple minutes that I would like to put this on. I don't know that we're going to get there this year. It's fairly solid. There's a little bit of rust starting around the doors and stuff there, the wheel wells that we should probably spray some fluid film on to help protect while it's sitting here. But really the crane is the main draw to this bed. It's a nice little IMT. I think it's a 5,000 pound crane, so pretty handy. Next to that, we have a Land Rover. I don't remember what year, early 2000s, maybe 04, 05, something like that. Picked this up at an auction over the summer. I don't know why. I should have kept my hand down, but I think I only got it for like 400 bucks or something. So yeah, I should probably move that thing, as well as this Toyota Corolla. It used to run. I used to drive it around here at the farm, and then it sat for a couple years without me touching it. And when I tried to move it to bring it down here, it did not want to start. So what you see is what you get. It's Toyota. I'm sure it's nothing. I had it fired up at first, and then it just shut off, and it won't start again. This guy right here is an F-250 my brother-in-law gave me. The transfer case is Gonzo in it. It does still run. The body's pretty rough, as you can see. It was a little bit better until the Kobelco slid into it the other day here. I was just tracking by, and the track was up on enough of a slope that we just right over into the side of it. Pretty bummed about that, but ultimately I don't think it really matters. The truck was not really deemed worthy of fixing the transfer case on, so basically I just have an engine sitting in the crate. These two power units right here, the one here and there's one behind it that's a little harder to see, I picked these up as a group of 3 a while back. That's a 471 Detroit right there. I did get it running one day on ether. Me and Muck were playing around one day while he was here. I think there's something going on with the valves in that engine, but it does run. Has a Rockford PTO on it. That one over there is a Hercules diesel. I don't remember the model, but I think it's somewhere around 45 horsepower. Also has a Rockford PTO on it, as well as a big high pressure Simplex pump on it. And I picked up those two and the third one that you're going to see here in a minute for like 250 bucks. So it was hard to turn that deal down. One Rockford PTO clutch like that is worth more than that. I saw some people asking about this thing a while back. This is a Freightliner service van that I bought at the auction a couple years ago. I think I only gave like 2,500 bucks for it, something like that. It's got a 24 valve Cummins diesel with an Allison automatic behind it and a PTO air compressor. The chassis itself is in pretty good shape. The body itself is also in decent enough shape. You can see it's got a little bit of crease going on down the side there, but it's all aluminum, so it's not rotted out. Runs good, drives good, doesn't have brakes. Problem is I lost the title for it somehow. I'm really good about titles. I have all that stuff organized very well, except for this one. Last year, after this video that I made, somebody wanted to buy it, and I spent half the summer trying to find the title. It never got put into my name when I got it from Ritchie Brothers, and now it's just gone. There's probably some complicated way I could get the title for it, but ultimately I bought it to use the engine and drivetrain out of it. I don't think that's ever going to actually happen, so if somebody's actually interested in this thing, I'd work you a deal on it. Got a couple dozer blades here, the small ones for the D4, the big ones for the D8. But behind that is the Unit 1020 dragline I bought a few years back. I bought this machine. It was my first cable machine, and I had all the intention in the world of getting it quickly back up and running. Problem was, when I went to pick it up, they were lowering the boom down to disassemble the boom, and the cable snapped, the boom fell, damaged the boom section, and it just turned into a whole lot more of a project than I was really looking for at the time. These aren't super rare machines, but I guess they're not super common either. They are getting to be pretty old. This one is a I can't remember if it's a 50 or a 57. The sheet metal's all pretty rough on it. The undercarriage is wore slap out on it. The 6-cylinder Chrysler industrial engine does run like a top though, amazingly enough. The controls are all worn, very worn controls. But check out the counterweight on this beauty. Baby got back, okay? I really, really hate the idea of cannibalizing this machine, but that counterweight would look really cool in my basement as a bar top. Over at the Counterweight Lounge, you see. I've actually been looking for another counterweight just like it so that I don't have to cannibalize this one. The time ticks by, this machine's not getting in any better condition, and my project list definitely is not getting any shorter, so turned into a real nail biter situation, if you will. This truck here is a rotted out pile of junk pretty much. I bought this thing a couple years ago, mainly for the engine and the transmission, mainly for the transmission. The 10-speed Eaton in my dump truck is not long for the world. It's got a couple bad gears in it, but it's kind of one of those things that it's already as bad as it's going to get until it gets exponentially worse. So you just kind of keep driving it until it grenades. You have a spare. This has a low mileage, and when I say low, I mean like under 100,000. International DT466 mechanical engine in it, which is the clarifying factor there. Fantastic engines. This one was pulled out of service due to severe rust jacking on the double frame. Aside from being completely rotted out, it is nearly the identical truck to my dump truck though, so we have already cannibalized several parts off this thing over the years to keep little red dumpy in good shape. Did a property cleanup last year sometime, and this boat was on the list of things they wanted removed. It's a nice little aluminum boat, and I have big ambitions to do something with this thing. Whether we'll ever get there or not remains to be seen, but it's got a 40-horse Johnson sitting down in the inside the boat there. I should probably pull that thing out. The story that I was told with this boat was that it was last in the water in 1991 or 2. So she's in great shape, but it holds water, so I figure it would still float. I guess let me know if you guys would be interested in seeing me try to bring the old Johnson back to life there. I don't know that it's really worth much. Could be completely scrapped out. I don't know. We did a video on this thing a while back, and I don't really have any plans for it. It's well, I couldn't even tell you what year anymore. The reason I have this little unit is because of that guy right there. It's a cute little diesel for something. The clutch is out of this car. The body is all rusty and terrible. Interior is completely gone, and I don't have a title for it. So the actual vehicle itself, completely junk. However, the engine still runs like a top. I guess what I probably should do, and it would make all you VW guys cry, is yank that engine out of there and scrap the rest. Speaking of engines, this little unit here is a 471 Detroit power unit connected to some big high pressure water pump, and this is part of that group of 3 I was mentioning a little bit ago that I picked up for $250. I think this one is the one that's stuck. So out of the 3 units, one of them was stuck, and I think this is the guy. But just look at the heavy trailer that it's on for $250. Couldn't pass up that deal. That was just a little too good to beat. This truck here is a mid-90s, I think, F700. This truck also came from the tire shop, as you can see. Got a nice aluminum bed on it and a nice big knuckle boom crane. I've never really messed with the crane, but I know the swing drive motor is off of the crane and they could not find a replacement for it. The bed and the crane would be for sale. I would like to get those kicked down the road and out of the way. That would make it a lot easier for me to get started on my service truck project, because this is ultimately the truck I would like to put that service bed that we looked at earlier on, the little red one. We'd have to shorten the wheelbase, slide the axle forward quite a bit, but should be a nice little truck for that. It's got a 12-valve Cummins and an Eaton 7-speed. It's a pretty nice, clean old truck. So to put a little bow on top of Purgatory here, last thing that just happens to be sitting up here is the Mighty Mac. Picked this thing up at the beginning of the summer. This is a Mack CL713. I've actually already used this truck a fair bit more than I thought I would. Me and Sam have been going out and rescuing iron in volume. A little bit of a dangerous thing to have, being able to move my stuff so easy now. So I've been really liking the truck, but that low boy that I have is ground bearing. We've been over that in the past. It's just, I need to throw a deck on it and put a for sale sign on it as well. So the 1,000-yard overview of how I got to be in this predicament with all this equipment and so many irons in the fire is that I started with lawnmowers, little push mowers even when I was real young, tearing them apart, fixing them. I moved up to bigger and better until I got to red tractors, or full-size tractors. In my opinion, the only good tractors are red. Your mileage may vary. Anyways, this was the first real red tractor I picked up, which by my standards now is kind of a Tonka toy. But this is a 41 Farmall A, and others have come and gone, but this one has just always stuck around, and I like this little tractor. It's fairly straight, except for the front end there, but I have another one of those on a parts tractor. I would love to be able to blast this thing and give it a good resto one day, make it a nice little parade tractor. It's not going anywhere. It's always been under roof. It's going to stay that way. I might not get to it this year. I might not get to it this decade, but someday I would like to overhaul it and restore it. It drove in here under its own power. I'm sure if I played around with the points and the carburetor, I could probably drive it out under its own power as well. It's probably been sitting here for, oh gosh, 6 or 8 years at this point. Time flies when you're having fun. So parked in here in one of my little offshoot trails along the driveway is a 1942, I want to say, Caterpillar motor grader. This is a 212 model. Bought this at the same sale where I picked up the Bucyrus Erie 22B, and this thing was locked up tighter than a drum. If you haven't seen the videos on it, they were a good watch. This is one of those ones where a lot of people said it's never going to run, and man, this thing actually runs really good now. It's incredible actually how well I got this thing running. It all functions and works. It's just an ugly duckling right now. I think it would be a lot of fun, once I get the good sandblaster set up working right, to blast it and throw a coat of paint on this thing. But ultimately, I don't have any big ambitions with it. Not real attached to it. If someone were to be interested in this thing, it could probably be persuaded to go down the road. Old golf cart just giving her. Well, we're moving on back here to the laydown yard. And the first thing that we're going to come across is the Bantam T350 crawler crane. This is the one that was on the back side of that big massive lake that I got. We got this thing running after sitting for who only knows how long. The original owners of that property found the video and commented on it and claimed that it had been sitting there for over 40 years, which I believe it, looking at where it was. This was also some of my favorite videos that we've ever done. It was probably the biggest adventure type revival that I've ever done. And it was really amazing that this thing was able to move under its own power all the way around this big massive lake. I think we figured out that it walked almost a mile from where it had been parked through the woods over to where eventually we loaded it onto a truck. It's got a little Detroit 353 powering this unit, and aside from sheet metal, it's in pretty good shape. It's got a dragline bucket there. It needs a little bit of work on the point section of the boom. As you can see, it's a little banged up, but really wouldn't take too much angle iron and a welder to make that all happy again. The only reason that I never really put it back together when we got home is the slide jaw clutch. Where is it? Right in there. That thing's supposed to, there's a collar on that shaft that's supposed to slide, and that runs the hoist for the boom. So to get it home and disassembled, we had to actually support the boom with come-alongs, cut the cable, and lower the boom down with come-alongs and fold it up like you see. This has been on the front of my mind lately as well. I would like to get this thing operational and at the very least use it as a little yard crane around here. I think it would be pretty handy. Like, I have the big Grove crane, and of course if I need to do any heavy lifting, that would be immediately where I'm going. But this guy is awful mobile on its nice wide tracks like that. Fires right up and runs good. So I should fix that hoist and get some new rope strung up on this thing and fix that point section and have a nice little picker around here. Amazingly enough, that's the Chinese brush cutter. I don't think I used it at all this year, but last I used it, it still worked fine. These big guys right here are skids off of 20-foot shipping containers that I bought at the sale last year. These are what's going to turn into the support columns for the overhead crane project in the shop. Behind the Bantam is a little old light plant that I picked up at that property cleanup job I mentioned where that little aluminum boat came from. This guy has a small 2-cylinder Lister diesel in it, and those are not very common around here. So I snagged it and brought it home here. All the sheet metal's pretty junk on it, but I bet you that engine runs. I've just never got around to messing with it. That could probably be a nice little will it start video for you guys one of these days. You guys should all be pretty familiar with everything under the roof here at the shipping container shop. The only thing we really need to talk about would be the auto car. This is the Komatsu D41A bulldozer. This is my primary dozer I use around here for just general projects. It doesn't really need anything. It's a turnkey running, probably one of the nicest machines I own, honestly. For the age and for what I do, this thing is pretty awesome. International 454 utility tractor. This is my mowing tractor. The Ventrac does all the hard to get places, but the big open areas along my driveway and the field and stuff. 7-foot Woods rotary mower on the back. Does a good job. It really only gets run a handful of times per year at this point, but always fires up and does what I need it to do. There's a snorkel scissor lift in front of that we've never gotten functional. I need to get on that project because it would sure be nice to have a scissor lift in the shop from time to time, especially when it comes time to really getting serious on that crane project. I don't think it'll take a whole lot. Sam fixed his in like 2 days. Oh man, it makes my head hurt even thinking about the wiring inside of that thing. In front of that scissor lift, covered up under some junk, is a small walk-behind trench compactor. I actually did a video of getting this thing running. It's got to be 2 or 3 years ago now. It's got a little Hotz 1-cylinder diesel on it. The neighbor gave it to me, and he told me he had never had it running, and it sat up at his place for well over 30 years. But we got it running. Problem is the rollers, the drum rollers, are locked up. We can't get it to move. So really, that needs taken into the shop and completely blown apart. Would be a handy little unit to have, and probably worth a couple bucks at the end of all that. Even though it's pretty old, nothing has really changed on those things for a long, long time. That's probably a 70s model. Really not much different than they were made today. Ahead of that, we've got old Christine. Some of you newer viewers to the channel may not be familiar, but this is a 1964, I think, 64, 65 Galleon 503. The story is I drug this thing out of a tree row a few years back, and this is one of the projects that I actually pretty well finished. Some wouldn't say it's finished because I never put the glass back in the cab. I need the glass grommet, like the weather stripping that holds the glass into the cab. That's why I never finished putting the glass back in it, because I found it on one website. I need a fair bit of that stripping, and I was only able to find it on like one website, and I think it was over $1,000 for as much of that rubber stripping as I needed. So if any of you guys have a suggestion on where to get the window trim molding that holds the glass in, let me know down in the comments, because I would love to put the glass back in it. I have all the glass. None of it was broken when I bought the machine. I just destroyed the rubber removing it and could never get it back together. Parked undercover here as well as the 1953 Rio. This has been converted into a deuce and a half, but it did not start life that way. I don't remember what they called that truck when it was first issued, but basically they kept the original chassis, put the modern engine, put the modern diesel engine on it with the new bed and a new cab and all that. Over here at the 1957 Autocar, finally. I still get some questions about this truck. I have not forgotten about it. I still want to restore this truck. The reason I have not is because I'm not that good. I want to make this truck a very nice truck. This is one of the few things that I plan on actually restoring to like what I would call a museum quality restoration. And I don't have the technical skills for that yet. So I'm kind of using the other Autocar as a test subject, if you will, because that truck doesn't need near as much work. So it's kind of a good way for me to hone my skills and make sure I do a better job on this truck. So this cab is for that project. It's not the original cab. The original cab was steel. This is an aluminum cab. It has a steel door on it for some reason though. But is the same dimensional cab as what came off of that truck. I still have the original cab. This one is in far, far better shape. The steel one I have was very, very rotted out. Biggest issue with this cab is the stench. I don't know what was living in this thing, but my goodness does it stink in here. So we're not going to be fighting any rust on this cab, but there's still a lot of issues to deal with. I mean, look at this right here. I just noticed this actually. Somebody has hacked that door up pretty good, as well as up here there's like some, I don't know what you'd call those, like alignment tabs that run in here and meet the cab. And those have been highly damaged and removed for some reason. But the door still shuts good. But to answer your burning questions, the 57 Autocar is still in the works. I'm in no hurry to do it. It's not something I should rush. And I know if I listen to you guys and try to hurry up and crank it out, it's going to be botched. It's not going to turn out like I want. And ultimately, I'm just going to be mad at myself. I owe a lot to that truck. If you actually go back and look, this is one of the first videos on the channel that kind of blew up and got the channel to where it is today. But if you go back and watch those first videos when I first got that truck, I even said right then and there in those videos, I have no intention of restoring this thing for a long, long time. I just bought it because I found it and I thought it was a good deal. And at the time, I'd never seen those trucks really come up for sale before. Now I find them all the time, but I don't regret it. I just don't want to hurry up and do a bad job and regret that. Oh yeah, things are getting muddy now. Things are getting very muddy. I don't recall for sure. I think these machines have been here for a year now, so they might have just shown up when I did the video last year. But these are two Caterpillar 955L models. with the 13X serial number. So I believe these were the last series of 955Ls produced before they went to the rear engine, more modern track loaders you see today. I don't want to say that these are sought after, but they're definitely a favorite among people that have run them. The story here is I bought them both as a pair off my buddy Gino. This one was a really nice straight tractor that they used to run in their dirt business all the time. Worked good. They were actually using it on a job. It developed a knock. They started to load it on a trailer to take it out of there and get it home, and it locked up the engine. Supposedly it was in an idle when it locked up, so maybe it's not damaged. I don't know. Anyway, long story short, it just sat around at their place and they never ended up fixing it. But it's got all the sheet metal, all the panels and everything in there. It's got the nice original Caterpillar cab on it, but the undercarriage is getting pretty worn and the engine's locked up. The loader itself is pretty tight, supposedly. I've obviously never run it. The machine next to it, though, they bought as a parts donor for their machine. This one here runs and functions, supposedly has basically no time on an engine rebuild. Supposedly the engine was all overhauled and then it just sat around too. But it's got basically a like new undercarriage on it. The loader frame is pretty clapped out though, not near as nice. It's missing a bunch of the sheet metal on it. The cab is some aftermarket, nasty looking cab. And the idea here was just to take both of them, make one really good one out of the two of them. A 955 track loader would be handy to have. I do like that both of these machines have double bar grousers rather than triple grousers like a lot of track loaders have. This one does run and drive, albeit not great. So my plan was to pull them both in the shop someday, blow them apart, make one good unit out of the two. Probably not going to do that until after the crane is up in the shop, because that would make life a heck of a lot easier if we had the crane. A lot of heavy lifting on that project. Moving on from the 955s, we have the Hitachi 450 excavator. I got this at the last Ritchie Brothers sale and actually ended up finding out quite a bit about it. This came from the Trumbull Corporation, and I actually spoke to the mechanic that was last with this machine. Supposedly the engine has a recent overhaul, maybe less than 2,000 hours, I want to say he told me. New hydraulic pump at that time when they rebuilt the engine, as well as 3 brand new cylinders on it. There was a crack in the boom when I bought it, but I've actually had that repaired now. The only thing this thing has really going against it is there's a small leak on the turntable somewhere, like in the swing drive, not the turntable, I shouldn't say that. There's just a small hydraulic leak. I think it might just be an O-ring in one of the hoses that runs the swing drive. And the bucket pin itself has a little bit of wear to it. Definitely not bad enough to need line board or anything. I think some new pins and bushings and you'd be pretty well set there. But I was told that the rest of the boom has been line bored a couple times, and it's a pretty tight machine from the little bit of running I've done of it. Fires right up even on the coldest days. I've used it around here for just making some big picks. Travel's nice, swings nice. You know, it seems like it's a good tight machine. I have no need for it. I bought it to try to make a couple bucks on it. So this guy's for sale. If you're in the market for a Hitachi 450, drop me a line. I got a good one here. Directly behind the Hitachi is a Hanson dragline. I bought this thing out of Ohio over the summer. Me and Sam and Big John went and picked this thing up. It's got a locked up tight 271 Detroit in it, and it's a cool little machine. I've never seen another Hanson. It's got a riveted boom, but according to the data manufacturing plate, it's only a 1957, which you don't really see riveted stuff in 57. So that's kind of a neat look to it. It looks older than it is. It's got a typical manual friction control upper, but the bottom half, like the tracks, is controlled by pneumatics, which is pretty unusual. Hiding underneath the Hitachi and the Hanson here is an NPK GH12 hydraulic hammer, if anybody's in the market for one. Doesn't fit anything I own. Next to the Hanson is the Buffalo Springfield roller. Me and my buddy Mike got this thing running last year, did a video on it. You guys probably saw. Supposedly a buddy of mine is supposed to come buy this thing. He hasn't managed to get down here yet, but supposedly it's sold. Next to that roller is the Vibro Plus roller. We did some videos on this thing years ago before the shop was built, and this thing has done some work around here. It's compacted quite a bit of the pad for the building and for the fill back here behind the building, as well as my driveway. It's done quite a bit of work on all that stuff. It's got a 3-cylinder Hotz diesel on it, FL2 or 3 or something like that. I think it's FL3 maybe. Still runs good. The clutch has always been an issue on this thing. Not to mention it's super, super loud when you run it. A lot of times it's just static rolling. It does run really good, so no complaints there. So connected to this vibratory tow behind roller is the Caterpillar D4D I mentioned earlier. This is a manual transmission versus the power shift that we have up front now. This one is in substantially better condition though, as you may note. It actually runs and functions just fine. Undercarriage is pretty sloppy on it. The track tensioners are gonzo. So I'm hoping I can make one nice D4D out of the two of them. I don't have the sheet metal on this thing, but I do have the sheet metal for it. So it's not a bad tractor all by itself, but it would be a lot nicer if it was a power shift unit. Next to the D4D is old Fat Alice. You guys will no doubt recognize her from her many, many cameos on the channel here. Really nothing to report back on her. She is just fat and sassy as ever. I actually bought and have yet to pick up a parts machine for this machine. It's pretty rough, but it has a loader bucket on it, and my intention was to make it so I could rig up some sort of a quick coupler between the two and be able to switch between bucket and forks. And I bought that parts machine to do that right before the auction when I bought these two machines. So I bought these things pretty much sight unseen. I didn't know how good or bad they were really going to be. Turns out that one seems to be pretty good. I haven't really touched this one yet. But they are a far cry, honestly, better than Fat Alice. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get rid of Fat Alice by any stretch, but the whole idea of a quick coupler sounds a lot harder than just keeping another machine with a bucket on it. These are pilot-controlled machines. They have a lot nicer cab on them. They're Deutz diesels, so no radiator system to worry about, no antifreeze, no nothing, or air-cooled diesels. These are actually O&K L25 machines sold in the US under the Kobelco name. Don't ask me why. So I bought this loader and that loader for $3,500 each and was able to drive that one onto the trailer. This one, I think I would be able to drive if I replaced the hydraulic line on the transmission. We're pretty much out of fluid, so it doesn't try to do anything, but it does run. Much like the two 955s, my plan here is to make one really nice loader out of the two, although when I'm done with the 955s, I'm not sure the carcass is going to be salvageable for a whole machine. This, I should still have one decent machine afterwards. I'm just going to make one really nice, and the other one's going to be missing a little bit of stuff, but still functional. Moving back here behind the loaders is the Cub Cadet collection and the parts tractor for the Farmall A. I mentioned I had a nice grill. That's it right there. Over here is an addiction. I have fallen in love with these tractors as a young kid. My neighbor used to mow his grass with one of those, and it just always looked and sounded like the coolest little garden tractor you ever did see. His was almost identical, except it looked a lot nicer and had fenders on it. The very first Cub Cadet that I bought in 2004 or 5 was a Model 100. Much like the 57 Auto car, I started to restore one of these things, the first one that I bought. And I was just a kid at the time, and I really got into it about halfway and decided that I was not happy with what it was turning out like. I knew I didn't have the facilities, the tools, or the skills to do it how I wanted it. And so I kind of just pushed it off and said, well, someday I'd like to do this thing up really nice, and I still would. The problem is that I got addicted to actually just using those tractors, and I bought a whole bunch more. This is not all of them. This is all the ones that are on this property, well, minus one that's sitting over there. If you don't know anything about these, they are super stout little garden tractors built by the International Harvester Company from 61 to 83. I have a strong preference for the narrow frame tractors, which would be like this guy right here, this guy. This is the narrow frame. The wide frame tractors, which is like this 1650 here, you can see the frame is built quite a bit different than this one, but still super good units. Actually, the wide frames are a more stout tractor. I just don't like the look of them as much. I prefer the old school antique kind of look that these things had, the metal seat pan. That all gets me going. I bought all of these, with the exception of these two, from one place, somewhere down in Maryland. I forget exactly where. I think it was kind of from an estate clean out, and I got them all for a good deal. I think they were probably going to be junked if I didn't go down and get them. Long story short, there's some nice tractors here. I believe all of them would probably run with a little bit of work. None of them are junk, I can tell you that. This one here, the 1650, it has dual remote hydraulics on it. I'd like to keep this one, but the rest of these I would sell. So I would like to keep the 1650, the 2 narrow frames, but I would sell that 1200, that 1200, this 1450. I'd sell the 147 and the 106, and this 1250 down here I would sell as well. So if you're in the market for a Cub Cadet, I could probably hook you up with a decent deal on one. This is the only deer on the property, and as you can see, it's dead, which is the natural state of deer. Transmission went out of this, and the neighbor gave it to me as a power plant. I believe the engine still ran good when I got it. It's been sitting out here for a couple years now, but it's protected. It should be fine. We did a video on this guy a while back, and actually this video blew up. It's got, I think, over 1 million views. It's a Mitsubishi MT372 little diesel garden tractor. Nice little tractor. I threatened to paint it up for the wife, but we all know that that's not going to happen, and she's not going to drive it. It's been a while since I used it, but it still fires right up and goes to work, no problem. I know that this video has gone on way longer than I expected, but we're coming down to the end here. You're not seeing double. Behind me is a Galleon 503. Should be around the same vintage as Christine, the one that we fixed up and painted. I picked this up over the summer. A friend of the channel reached out and gave me a good deal on it. The reason I picked it up is because A, it has a Scarifier on it, which Christine does not. She's missing. I would like to find one for Christine. The mold board is in substantially better condition than Christine's. The cab, not in bad condition. But the engine is the main reason I picked this thing up. This has a, UD234 diesel international power plant in it. The gas engine in Christine has given me a lot of fits. I've spent a lot of time trying to get that thing to run right, and for whatever reason, it is just refuses to run properly. So I bought this thing with the idea that I was just going to slap the engine in Christine and take the Scarifier off and sell what was left, or, you know, whatever. Use this for parts primarily. But after I bought it and started looking at it, it's a little too nice to do that to. It's actually pretty straight. Sheet metal's all in pretty good condition. If you pay attention closely to Christine, she's not that nice. I did that during COVID, and I called it a socially distant restoration. Partially me just being punny, but the other part was I didn't do that good a job, and I knew it because I just wanted to get the thing back together and running, but I had it so far apart it seemed crazy to me to put it all back together without giving it a coat of paint. If I knew then what I know now, I would have sandblasted the whole thing and done a better job, but I didn't. I wire wheeled it, and I used tractor paint versus something a little bit better. But I didn't have the facilities or the means that I have now, so I would like to do that better ultimately. This machine seems like the better candidate. I do have a video started on this machine. We never got around to making an ending for it, basically, but you will see it in an upcoming video. The Big Grove. Oh, this thing has, it's come in handy already around here a couple times for doing some heavy lifting action. Bought this at the sale, over a year ago now for $3,500, and it doesn't owe me a dime. I like this whole thing. It's a 30-ton hydraulic crane. I bought it just like you see it. If you haven't seen the video on it, it's a good one. You should check it out. We drove it home from the auction. It died along the road, but we got her going again, and yeah, it's been good ever since. I actually had this thing in the local homecoming parade this year. They did it up like a parade float, and we drove it down the road for the parade. So I was even able to use it to set some of the walls for my house project. It doesn't really need much anything. It's pretty much turnkey, put it to work. This guy right here, we picked this up at the sale a month or two ago now, the same time I bought that Hitachi and those wheel loaders and everything else. This is an AM General, I believe it's an M920 truck, something like that. It's a military 6-wheel drive, heavy haul spec truck. It's got a big cam 2, 400 horsepower Cummins in it with a 16-speed Caterpillar automatic transmission, as well as a big old recovery winch back here. That all sounds well and good, and it seems like something that should be straight up my alley and a good truck to have for all the recovery work we do. I just don't like it. I don't know. I can't bring myself to want it. I can't bring myself to use it. I think it's a transmission issue. If it had a real transmission in it, I would probably like it a lot more. But that automatic transmission just turns me off, and it's not worth putting another one in, at least in my opinion. I've got too much else going on. There's nothing wrong with the transmission. It does everything a transmission's supposed to do. It goes forward and stops and goes through all the gears just fine. It's a low mileage truck. I believe this truck has just under 10,000 miles on it. And I actually know the company that sold it through the auction. They told me there was nothing wrong with it. They just weren't using it themselves, so it was sitting in their yard and they decided to sell it. So it's a good running, working truck. If anybody's looking for a heavy haul truck, this could be your guy. Over here next to the shop is another rusty relic I brought back. Oh, I can't remember if it was this year or last year. I bought this thing through an auction for I don't know, $600 or $700. Pretty cheap, less than scrap value. This is actually an HT4 Caterpillar loader, or what's left of one. As you can see, the loader arms are missing. There's no bucket or anything on it. But I bought it for the engine primarily. There's a lot of other good parts on it as well. This is a very similar machine to the D47U that we talked about very early in the video here. It's got good sprockets on it, fairly good undercarriage, and some other parts as well that would work to help fix up that D4. Pony motor spins over freely. I don't know the condition of the diesel engine, but it is the same D315 cat that is in the D47U. The reason I don't know how good it is or isn't is the pinion here that engages the pony engine to the diesel is locked up tight. I can't get it to engage the diesel, otherwise I'd be able to use the pony motor to spin the diesel and make sure that it's free. Basically, I bought this thing as a parts machine, so here it sits. And when we get the D47U in the shop, hopefully soon, we're going to know what we need to do with this thing. Not a whole lot to see out back of the shop here. I do have a Nitro Bass boat that I traded a friend of the channel, one of my Toyota forklifts that I got from the sale. It's a, 75 horse Mercury on here. It's got a fish finder on it and stuff. I don't know anything about boats. I think the idea of a boat sounds nice. I wanted to get it on the water before the weather turned sour, but I'm busy and that just didn't happen, unfortunately. Hopefully, me and the wife can find some time this coming spring and summer and get this thing out on the lake and use it a little bit. The F800 crane truck. Been a long time since you guys have seen this on the channel, but I decided a couple months ago that it was time for me and her to part ways. It does run, it does drive, the crane works pretty darn well. I really can't complain about the crane side of things. The engine leaves a little bit to be desired. This is the engine I did the field rebuild on, the shade tree rebuild, if you will. I don't think there's anything wrong with the engine in particular. I think the starter's a little bit weak. It's hard to spin it over very fast to get this thing started, as well as the carburetor seems to hate its life as well. I have a new carburetor, well, new used carburetor in the shop for it. Just have yet to get it installed. If you'd hit this thing with a pressure washer, it would actually clean up pretty decent. But it's going to be for sale if anybody's interested. It's a National Series crane. I don't recall the specs on it right now, but if you go to the videos on the $700 crane truck, you can see all that and more. I think the very last thing we have to cover here is this Ingersoll roller. This is a 55-inch roller I picked up back in the spring, I believe it was. We had to replace the vibratory motor on it. It's got a Cummins 4BT engine, and I have a shell kit for it as well. And we used this over the summer quite a bit with the house project, not to mention putting in all the fill back here for the yard. If you recall, at the beginning of the summer, like this whole area where all that equipment and stuff sitting was quite a bit different. We put in a lot of fill material back here to make this what it is now. Yeah. Well, we wrapped up just in time. The rain started coming down out there again. That is every single piece that is here on the property. Now, there are a few caveats to that. I know there's going to be some people asking me about the machines we didn't mention. There are a few machines that are not here on the property. I have a couple out on loan. One of them is the 977 track loader, Big Greta. She has been over at my buddy Brad's on his property over there doing some clearing work for the last, well, I think 3, maybe going on 4 years now. It's still mine, I still own it. I don't have a use for it here, so it's fine. It stays out of sight, out of mind over at Brad's place. He uses it as he needs it. I do have some work I'd like to do to it if it ever comes back. I have a new set of tracks out there to put on it. And other than that, that machine's a pretty solid runner. I think he said it needs a packing seal on one of the lifting cylinders at this point, so not a big deal. The other machine I have out on loan is to the fairgrounds right now. I need to go pick it up, actually. Is the Caterpillar 922B loader. We loaded that up at the end of my trailer fixing video a few weeks ago. I took it over to the Washington County Fairgrounds. We lit it up like a Christmas tree, and they used it for their heavy equipment Christmas extravaganza over there. Deck the Barns, I believe is what they actually call it. So little shout out for Christmas next year. They have a cool drive-through light display over there called Deck the Barns. The wife helped me decorate the machine this year. She seemed to really take a liking to that, so she wants to do it bigger and better next year, so I'm all for it. So last but not least, we have some machines up at the National Pike Steam Show. I have 4 pieces up there, if my memory serves me correctly. I have the Lorraine cable backhoe. We have the Bucyrus Erie 22B shovel. We have Caterpillar D8H, it's another 46A model, and we have the D9H. So all that stuff just lives up at the steam show. That way we don't have to deal with hauling it back and forth because it's not exactly easy to move stuff. Whew! I feel like I've been talking for the last 3 hours. Oh wait, I have. Doing this video every year reminds me that I have a lot of crap, and some of it definitely needs to go. I know I see that comment a lot that, you know, I got more than I'll ever do, or, you know, making the place look like a junkyard. I recognize those comments. You guys are not wrong, but you also don't see it from my perspective as I feel like I'm doing a good thing here, saving all this stuff, not to mention providing free content for you guys, and you really seem to enjoy it. The other thing I don't think a lot of people realize is that my definition of saving something isn't necessarily bringing it home here and restoring it and, you know, going out and taking it on a job and using it every day. A lot of this stuff, when I say I'm saving it from the torch. If I don't buy it, somebody's coming in with a gas axe very quickly behind me, and they're cutting it up, and it's going to wherever the scrap goes. You know, a lot of it goes to China, a lot of it goes overseas, and it comes back as junk. And you can say what you want about old equipment. It may be in poor condition, but hardly any of it was junk. A lot of it was built far superior to anything you can get today. I've talked about it in a recent video with parts, remanufactured parts for older stuff at this point. I don't care how much money you have to spend. It is hard to buy a quality item at this point. It seems like all the pride in manufacturing has gone away, especially in aftermarket parts. I mean, you can go buy a brand new Caterpillar dozer and it's a nice machine, sure. Are they built to last the way the old ones were? I don't personally think so. Your mileage may vary. They're still a great machine. I'm not putting them down in any way, shape, or form. I think the only way that, like, say Caterpillar separates themselves from the pack at this point in time, though, is through their dealer network and parts department. Other than that, I don't think their machines are anything special, anything better than the next 5 manufacturers behind them. Back in the day, I think there was a clear separation of a quality of a Caterpillar, an Alice Chalmers, you know, probably rattle off 10 other different brands. But they were building these things for us, for future generations to use. They weren't built to be, you know, run for a few years and then scrapped out and buy a new one. That was very much not the mindset back in the day. And I think it's a crying shame to send these things that have life left in them to the junkyard to be cut up and recycled. I mean, recycling's great. I'm not knocking recycling. I just think that there's a lot better uses for those things rather than coming back as Honda Civics. Anyways, you guys have heard me talking enough for one video. I hope you like our year-end tradition here of recapping all the old iron that we're saving or in the process of saving or selling or whatever. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys for watching this year. We've made another milestone this year of 800,000 subscribers, and we're still growing and climbing. And I'm hoping with any luck in 2025, we can hit 1 million. So if you know anybody that might like these videos that you haven't shared them with, I'd sure enough appreciate you reaching out to them and saying, hey, check this guy out. You know, you might get a kick out of his stuff. A lot of people have a misconception about the YouTube subscriber count. Subscriber count actually means nothing. It's all about views. If your videos get more views, whether you have 1,000 subs or 1 million subs, if you get more views than the guy with 1 million subs, you make more money. So I'm not saying that for monetary purposes. I just think it's a really cool bragging number at this point. I got the 100,000 subscriber plaque quite a while back, and I've been itching to get my hands on that 1 million subscriber plaque. So I probably don't say it enough, but I really do appreciate each and every one of you guys for watching this stuff. I could not do half of what I do without you guys watching this content and enjoying it. So I hope you keep watching. I hope you share this stuff with your friends if you think they might be interested in it. And 2024 has been a great year. Here's to 2025. We'll see you in the new year.